Yeah, welcome Tim Hunt, who's a developer. I found a complete and utter guru who knows is the fountain of all knowledge and developer, has kindly spent given some time to deliver his presentation on delivering online exams using Moodle. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Gareth. Not an over-the-top introduction at all, then. So I'm here to talk to you about how we're using Moodle for exams at the Open University. This is something we're just sort of starting to do. And the way this talk is going to be structured is I'm just going to start with a brief introduction about what the Open University is and what's involved in doing exams at the moment on paper. Then the second section, actually, you're going to get twice. We're going to go through the second section about how it works. First, looking at it from the student's point of view, what's actually going to happen during an online exam. And then we'll go back through it and I'll talk from the point of view of the Open University as an organisation, what's involved in making all that happen. And then at the end we can have a summary. That's the general outline. I don't actually have a slide to talk about the Open University for some reason, but it's an organisation that's about 44 years old. We founded at the end of the 60s, and all our students are distance learners. We have about 200,000 part-time students at any given time, and that's a mixture of undergraduates and postgraduate students, mostly undergraduates. And so at the Open University, what Moodle calls courses are called modules. We probably have about, that says 400 a year. Oh, no, yeah, and I know the number's more than that. That's 400, there are about 700 modules presented a year, and of those, about 400 have an exam. And that translates to about 92,000 students sitting an exam during the year. Now, as I say, it's all distance education, so we have students all around the UK and indeed around the world in some cases. So to arrange the exams, our exams team have to book conference centres, hotels, schools, colleges, anywhere really they can book a quiet room that's suitable to hold an exam in. And normally there are a couple of weeks a year where we have exams, and the rest of the time we don't. And also to supervise those exams in all those courses and in all those exam centres, we have about 2,500 invigilators trained. And by and large, at the moment, all that happens with students, write paper exam papers, writing on paper, with a very few exceptions. Some students with special needs have special permission to do the exam at home, typing into Microsoft Word, say, and in that sort of situation, there will be one person supervising them on a one-to-one basis. At the moment, that's the exception. So why do we want to let people type? Well, if you look at my handwriting, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Is there anyone in this presentation who's had to handwrite for 3 hours any time in the last few years? And if so, when? Oh, Gareth, why was that?
Exam doing my MSc.
Yeah, exactly. So it was an exam. It's really not something you ever have to do. And actually that's a problem for at least 2 reasons. I similarly have had to do this because I've been an Open University student. I have a postgraduate diploma in computing for commerce and industry, which was actually a very interesting and useful qualification. So I've had to do one of these 3-hour exams, and by the end, your hand hurts. You know, it's not used to that sort of physical activity. You holding a pen and it cramps. So there's the physical problem, but there's also the kind of mental, intellectual issue that when I write something these days, I type it into a computer. So, you know, I can write some rough words and then go back and edit it to fill in the gaps, and I can reorder the paragraphs or the sentences to make my meaning clearer. And if you're writing with a pen, the thought process is very different. You need to get your thoughts in order, then write it in the order it's going to finish in. So, yeah, writing is problematic in that sense, that it's not the means of communication that you're used to. So, you know, in the 21st century, at least some students would much rather type than handwrite, and I am one of them, and so we would like to make this possible. So that really explains the problem. We'd like students to be able to type, but it's a problem because, well, it's worth actually asking, why do we have exams? The Moodle world tends to be full of very right-on educators who believe in social constructivism and so on. It's not really in our natural beliefs to want to lock people in a room for 3 hours and say, dump all the knowledge out of your brain onto this bit of paper. The problem for the Open University as a distance teaching organisation is we may never meet a student face to face. You know, during the module, we will receive Word documents uploaded to our website, and we will grade them and send them back, but we don't know the student actually wrote those. They could have downloaded them from the internet or something. So the exam is the only place where we can really check that this person we're going to give exam degree certificate to is the person who, you know, who's learnt this knowledge. It may not be a very good test of learning, but it's the best we've got. And when you go and do an exam at the Open University, you have to bring some photo ID, like a driving license or a passport, and that is checked during the exam to make sure the person sitting in the room is the person who's supposed to be studying this degree. So educationally, there are issues, but it's a kind of necessary evil. And so in a paper exam, it's very strict. You come in, you know, you're allowed to bring in a pen, probably let you bring in some nibbles and a bottle of water and a ruler and some colours, but that's it. You know, and that makes it very easy to eliminate a lot of possible forms of cheating. We're now proposing that the students sit down at a computer or a laptop, which is probably one of the most powerful information storage and retrieval systems that exists. So that raises all sorts of security questions. Now, you might say in the 21st century, well, using a computer is a valuable intellectual skill, that the exam should be testing that. We should let students search Google during the exam if they want. The problem at the moment is, and for the foreseeable future, is that, you know, we're not going to force any students to type their exam. So the majority of students will still be doing a typical old-fashioned exam, handwriting on paper for 3 hours. And the test has to be fair. So all students have to get basically the same assessment. So those students typing have to be getting an assessment that is the same as the people who are handwriting. So it needs to be a sort of classic closed book exam. You read the question, you write the essay from memory. In 10 years' time, when the majority of students are doing typing their exams, then we can think about open book. But for now, we're in the world we're in. So how does this look from the student's point of view? And as I said, we're in the early stages of this. Last September, we did a trial, and out of, I've said we have 92,000 exams a year. Well, last September, 23 students typed their exams through this system. So we've got quite a long way to go. The next exam period is in June, and we're doing another trial there. And we have 200 spaces for students to do an online exam in 8 centres around the country. Anyway, so from the student's point of view, students on the modules that are taking part in the trial get an email, something like this, though the date would probably say June, saying, because you're on this module, would you like the opportunity to take your exam, type your exam rather than handwrite it? If so, please volunteer. And if they volunteer, they get another email that tells them what to do. Yes, Frank, that's a good point. The typed exam experience, we're trying to make it as similar as possible to handwriting in every way, so that will include going to an exam centre. So the instructions for students who want to take part is to go to this bit of our website. It's one of our Moodle sites, and download the appropriate version of the Safe Exam Browser software, and they can do it if they've got a Mac or a Windows laptop. So that's another thing. We're expecting the students to provide their own computers, and we'll talk about the issues of that later. So you download this software and install it, and then when you run the secure browser, it kind of completely takes over your laptop. It opens full screen, it blocks access to anything else that's running at the moment, and it goes straight to our website. I mean, it's basically a web browser, but there's no navigation, there's no browser toolbar. The web page fills the full screen, and as you can see on this exam site, we've completely stripped down our theme to remove all the navigation. Here's our normal VLE, and at the top you've got all these standard links and stuff, and there are more at the footer. On the exam site, it's as plain as we can make it. One of the things the Safe Browser stops you doing is leaving the Safe Browser easily. The point is, once you've started the exam, you're working away, you can't quit the Safe Browser, go and look something up on Google, then come back in. We want to stop that. So actually, the browser doesn't provide an easy way to quit. There is actually a secret keyboard shortcut. If you happen to know it, you can get out in an emergency. So in places where we do want students to be able to escape from the secure browser, we have to add a link. There's a link that will, and if you click that link, then the secure browser quits. But basically, when the students are just trying it out, they get onto the exam site, and all they can see is a link to the specimen exam paper. So that's a set of questions that are just like the real exam, and they can try it out. They can make sure everything works on their computer. They can, they can make sure they're happy actually responding to questions in this way. And then if they're happy at this point, having tried it, they can put their hand up and say, yes, I'm really committed. I want to do this for real in the exam. If they're not happy at this point, they can back out with no issues. Well, throughout this, if in doubt, the position is, well, actually go back, do it on paper like you always would have done. That's our kind of ultimate fallback if anything goes wrong. So assuming the student opts in, on the day of the exam, they go to the exam venue. As we've said, they need to bring some photo ID. They bring their laptop. If they're wise, they'll bring a power supply. They'll probably bring some refreshment because you're in a room for 3 hours. And they'll get in and they'll connect to the Wi-Fi. As you can see, this slide is lining up lots of issues we'll need to discuss when we come back and look at this from the Open University's point of view. And they log in, they get to the front page of the exam site, which now shows them their real exam, and they get to this, which is kind of the equivalent of the front page of the exam paper. And when you look at it on screen, it has an awful lot of words to just basically say, don't start yet. But, again, it's about having the same experience on the paper exam and the online exam. Those are pretty much the same words in the two cases. So at the designated hour, which is normally, I think it's 10 in the morning or 1:30 in the afternoon, no, 2:30 in the afternoon, not that really matters. They click start, and it's a perfectly normal Moodle quiz. And as I say, we're replicating the sort of standard exam experience, so it's all Moodle essay questions. But, from a student's point of view, this is a system they have used in their studies, in their modules as part of the continuous assessment. It's nothing unfamiliar, so that helps. You can also note, actually, we've across the top of the screen, we've put very clearly the student's name and what exam they're doing. The point of that is that the invigilator walking around checking the driving license can make sure the person is logged in as themselves and that they haven't logged in as a friend to do the work for their friend. At least that's the idea of that. Again, typical Moodle quiz, you get to the end, there's a summary where you can check you've answered all the questions, and at the end of the time, you click submit and finish, and then you're done. So, really very simple, yep, very simple use of the Moodle quiz. So now let's go back through those slides and talk about the issues we've had to address as the Open University to make all this possible. The first issue to talk about is which modules we can invite to be part of this pilot project. The big limitation at the moment, we have Moodle essay question. It's very good at words. We don't yet have a good solution for drawing diagrams. And an awful lot of science and management studies and music and maths needs diagrams. So they're out. The modules involved in the pilot, I think we have 3 from the humanities faculty, 1 from education, and 2 from education and 1 from social science. And even in those disciplines, you may well be doing something that wants a diagram to illustrate the response. But these modules have decided it's safe to offer students the choice to do the exam online because the chance they'd want to draw a diagram is pretty low. So as I say, it's 6 modules in June, over 3 days, morning and afternoon. And I said we had space for 200 students. Well, we put out the invitation and very rapidly 450 responses came back saying, please can I be part of this? I want to type. So that was quite reassuring that actually there is demand from students. I don't know exactly how many invitations we sent out. These are some of the very big first level undergraduate modules. So we probably sent, I don't know, 4,000 invitations. So it's about a 10% response rate. So it's still a minority of students who want to opt into this as a sort of experimental pilot project. But even though it's kind of experimental, we don't know if it's going to work, there are quite a lot of students who want to be part of it. The Safe Exam Browser software, this is an open source product. It's produced by the University of Zurich. Actually, not the University of Zurich, a technical college in Zurich. They are working with a sort of consortium of Swiss universities, and we're going to see them next weekend. That's going to be nice. Well, not next weekend, just the Tuesday. We're going to have a meeting with them and watch one of their exams. But this software, as I say, on Windows, it's built on top of the Firefox rendering engine. On Mac, it's built on top of the Safari browser component. It locks down, as I say, it comes up full screen. It prevents other software running at the same time. Although there is an interesting feature that, again, we're not using yet, but you can make a whitelist of allowed applications, and they use it in some technical subjects. So, for example, you can use a secure browser and you can use Microsoft Excel to do some data analysis, and then the exam gets you to do some data analysis with Excel in exam conditions, but you can't access anything else. So that's quite interesting. But as I say, at the moment, we're just focusing on equivalent to paper exams. It blocks other things. It blocks, for example, you can't run it in a virtual machine, because one way you could cheat, you could have a virtual machine running the secure browser and another virtual machine on your laptop running an ordinary operating system with access to Google, and you could quickly flip back and forth. Well, no, you can't. We blocked that. It's pretty well thought out. And that's a very timely question. Frank's just asked, do students use their own laptop or is it in a computer lab? Version 1 of this Safe Exam Browser software was designed to be used in a computer lab. which is a much easier situation because these are computers that the university owns. The university can wipe all the software on them off them and install just the things they want there during the exam. We took a look at that number of 92,000 exams a year and decided that really the only viable option was we could only do this if the students provided their own laptop. Now that is a much bigger problem because the students are in complete control of what runs on that laptop most of the time. So it makes security much more difficult. Version 2 of Safe Exam Browser has been designed with this scenario in mind. It's often called Bring Your Own Device, BYOD. And they've added a lot of features for increasing security in that scenario. There's some very clever stuff that goes on so that Moodle can verify which version of the secure software is running and which configuration file has been loaded. I think all that's in the Safe Exam Browser documentation. And there's a Moodle add-on, the Safe Exam Browser quiz access rule that you can get from the plugins database, which verifies that the student is using the Safe Exam Browser before it lets them attempt the quiz. All the links to things like this add-on I've just mentioned are in the iMoot course, so you can find the links there later. So I think that's everything I wanted to say about the secure browser. The Moodle side, I've already talked about the theme and how it's very stripped down. Is there anything I want to add? I will add that while we've stripped it down, we did intentionally stick with a design that was very similar to our main VLE design, so it was a sort of familiar interface for students. I mentioned the big prominent student name across the top. I'll just add that if you scroll down, then that bar stays on the top, so the student's name is always clearly visible. The next point to make is that with this is the front page of a Moodle site. So this is linked to K101 specimen exam paper is a Moodle course. But when you click on that link to the course, you get directly to the front page of the quiz because we're using something called the single activity course format. People who've been using Moodle for a long time will may know about the SCORM course format, and that used to let you have a course that was just a single SCORM package. Well, around the Moodle 2.4 time, Marina Clancy from Moodle HQ realized there was no reason this should only be SCORM packages. She made this generic thing called the single activity course format that lets you have a Moodle course that's basically one single activity of any type. So we're using single activity course format to say when you go to this course, actually go straight to this quiz. And it works very nicely. And they added it to the standard Moodle download in Moodle 2.6, so you know it's no longer even an add-on. So if you don't know about that, that's worth knowing about because, in some situations it's exactly what you want to build a very simple Moodle course that's just one activity. Now, a lot of the really big issues are to do with the exam hall. I mean, the system divides into there are three parts really. There's the Moodle site at the back end, and really that's the least of our worries. We built that very easily. It seems to work quite nicely. I'm not jinxing it. Then there's the secure browser, and that's a bit more of it works very nicely, but we're expecting hundreds of students to install it on their own laptop, and getting software that works reliably on many laptops is always an issue. And of the 200 students signed up for the June pilot, we've had at least 3 of them have some sort of issue getting it installed. So, that's just a fact of life if you try and ship software, particularly if it's doing crazy stuff like the secure browser's trying to do. So what happens on the client side is a bit of an issue, but then there's the third thing, the venue to hold the exams in. And, if people are having laptops, there are at least 2 things we now require that you didn't used to need for exams. One is you need access to power at every desk. And more significantly, you need a really reliable wireless network. Now, Baz Brands is in the audience. He was at the Moodle in Edinburgh last month, and he will remember that the Wi-Fi there was not good. you know, 400 Moodlers turn up to a conference venue, most of them with a laptop and a phone, or an iPad and a phone. So you suddenly have 800 devices trying to connect to a Wi-Fi network, and not every Wi-Fi network can handle that. So that's, and you know, and having that happen, you know, recently was a salutary reminder to me that this is actually probably our biggest problem. The good news is, for our pilot in June, I said we've got 8 centres around the country, and none of those centres have space for more than 10 students. And I think for 10 students in a room, we're probably safe. And, you know, it is possible. I remember for the London Olympics in 2012, they made a really big deal that they had got BT to set up Wi-Fi in all these stadiums, so even with like 20,000 people in a stadium, the Wi-Fi would work. And as far as I know, they made that work. They spent an awful lot of money, but it is possible, and the technology is only going to get better. But it's definitely an issue. Moodle quiz. We did, because of this exams project, we did one thing, which was to enhance the quiz to automatically save the students' answers every few minutes. That went into Moodle 2.5, I believe. So Baz asks, why not wired internet? And the answer is because that's a whole other set of hassles to do with wires all around the room and so on. So, I mean, as I said, kind of everything we're doing here, it's kind of our experiment. We've chosen to try one way first. We hope it's going to work. If there's some part of the system that doesn't work reliably, then we'll have to think of a plan B. And in many cases, there are viable plan Bs, but we're only going to, you know, we're trying one thing at a time, basically. And we think Wi-Fi is going to be good enough. It often is. So quiz autosave, we wanted that to be on the safe side, and it seems to work quite nicely. You do need to go and turn it on. So in the admin settings of your Moodle site, yes, Joshua, the exam centres, we typically hire them. The recent exams I did, actually, bizarrely, were at Milton Keynes Football Stadium. That's soccer to you, Yanks. I was very amused the first time I got invited to an exam there. I had this picture that I would be sitting in the centre circle and there'd be like 10,000 screaming fans all cheering me on or something. But it turns out that Milton Keynes Football Stadium has a hotel attached, and we were just in some room in the hotel. But it was an amusing image for a bit. At least it amused me when stressed about exams. So anyway, autosave. Yes, so normally it quietly works behind the scenes, saving the students' answers every few minutes if they've changed something. You need to go and turn it on in the admin site admin settings, plugins, activity modules, quiz, and at the bottom of the screen there's autosave. And I'm thinking it's now been there for a few releases and no one's complained or reported many bugs, so we should probably turn it on as default now. Didn't turn it on as default initially because we weren't sure how much server load it would add, but it doesn't seem to add a huge amount. Now, the thing at the top of this screen, this big red warning, we had to add after the pilots last September because we had one unfortunate student who was answering this was one of the students with special needs working at home, and it turned out their internet connection dropped in the middle of their exam, but they didn't know that, and they kept typing for an hour until they tried to move to the next page, at which point they got an error and lost an hour's work. And I have to say they took this surprisingly well. I would have been completely furious, but they were quite sensible about it. They had time. They went back and retyped their answer and finished the exam and got a reasonably good mark. So, I saw one of the emails from them about what had happened, and they were much calmer than I would have been. Joshua asked a very good question. If you're running this secure browser that's taken over the whole screen, how do you go about reconnecting your Wi-Fi? Well, that is an issue which we have raised with the people at Zurich the main developer there is called Daniel Schneider, and they're thinking about that one. We don't have a really good answer to that. I mean, there is a way. I mean, our advice to students is, if in doubt, talk to the invigilator, tell them you've got problems, and they can help you quit the browser, reconnect your Wi-Fi, and go back in while making sure you're not taking the opportunity to cheat. Notepad is an interesting idea. You can always sort of do rough work in a bit of the HTML editor and edit it. We also will give students rough paper to do rough working. Joshua, some common keyboard shortcuts work in the secure browser. I can't remember exactly which. I'm pretty sure F5 to refresh the page does work. Anyway, that's autosave, and now autosave, if it detects that it can't actually do a save, it pops up a warning so you don't lose too much work before you sort out your internet connection. That's everything to say about that. You get to the end of the exam and you submit. The good thing about this approach is, by the end of the exam, when they click submit all and finish, all the data is already stored on the OU servers. So, you know, if they get to the end of the exam, we have the data. It's not like paper exams where you have a whole stack of paper in some hotel room on the other side of the country and it has to get back to the OU without getting lost. So, although there are many sort of difficulties in online exams, it does make some things easier. I think those are pretty much all the major issues we've had to deal with. So, this is just a summary of the bits of development we had to do to make this possible on the Moodle server side. Well, we didn't have to do it all because, as I've said, the single activity course format was made by Marina at Moodle HQ, but we just installed that. I did quiz autosave and we added it to core Moodle, as I say, in Moodle 2.5. Safe exam browser access rule, there's the link. It's in the plugins database. It's a very small amount of code. You saw we made a custom theme. When I say we, that was my colleague Mahmoud Kazai, and I should credit him actually. I'm cheating with this presentation. It's basically a presentation I gave at the Moodle in Edinburgh, and when I gave it in Edinburgh, it was a joint effort by Mahmoud and myself. So Mahmoud created about half these slides as well, so joint effort, and he deserves credit. And then one of our custom add-ons for Moodle is it's a local plugin that makes it very quick and easy to create different types of course with, you know, a certain set of blocks and default activities and settings. So obviously we made a thing for that to let you create exam type courses. And that was really it in terms of development. It was really, you know, and then a lot of work with Moodle, changing a lot of the custom configuration options, you know, to define the roles we want and so on. But really very close to Moodle out of the box for this. We did decide to do this on a separate set of servers, and I mean, I've heard other people talk about how they're doing exams, and they're doing the exams on their main Moodle VLE, which, you know, is simpler in some ways. But we decided it was simpler to keep everything secure, to install a separate Moodle site for this, put it behind a whole lot of firewalls. It's basically the same sort of platform as the rest of our Moodle sites. And if you've been to my other presentation about how we host Moodle, we have about 10 Moodle sites now. So a couple of web servers running Red Hat Enterprise Linux, database server running Postgres, and we have sort of master-slave replication with failover in case something goes wrong, and an NFS server, load balancer in front. It's kind of typical stuff. With this, you know, we took a reasonable guess at how much hardware we would need, and then we load tested it. With this hardware, our testing worked up to simulating 1,000 users all doing an exam at once. I'm not really sure how accurate a simulation it was, so I don't want to say it can genuinely, you know, it will certainly cope with 1,000 users doing an exam at once. But with the pilots coming up in June, the biggest exam has 66 students in, and I'm confident it will cope with that, no problem at all. And obviously, as the students are doing those exams, I will be sitting there watching the server monitoring and seeing what the CPU load is, and I'm hoping it will be down under 10% and there'll be no worries. And then also we'll be able to use that to kind of extrapolate and guess how many people the system could really cope with. Here are some of the comments. As I say, look, we did a pilot with 23 students last September. Here are some of the things they said. I honestly didn't just pick out the good comments. This is a representative sample of comments. They all liked it a lot. I'll give you a minute to read those. I think in the second comment, the word karma is an interesting choice of word. I'm not sure it's the word I would use about using a computer, but this student clearly thought that. And the third comment, interesting to say that it's easier to switch back and forth between different questions without having to worry about running out of space. Anyway, that's what the students thought. As I say, the pilot last September was with a very small number of students. What we did then is we took the students. I said some students have special permission to do the exam at home because they have special needs. We had some of those students, and another sort of problematic category is students who are abroad at the time of the exam. What typically happens for them is that they have to go and find something like the British consulate in the other country and do the exam there. So these are situations where one person was supervising one student. And interesting, one of the overseas students involved in that pilot was in Perth, Western Australia, which I thought was really rather appropriate. I liked that. Anyway, so the students who take part, and of course these are students who've chosen to be early adopters of this system, but they really like it, and that's nice to see. And that's really everything I wanted to say. But as I alluded to before, we've made certain choices about how to implement this. And because we've been thinking about this for a few years, we've been looking out for other webinars and so on and seminars by other people talking about how they're doing online exams. And there are different ways you might try to do this. So a big choice is the choice between online and offline. I mean, we've chosen to go with Moodle, which means that during the exam you need a working internet connection between the student's computer and the server. Another approach is typified by Andy Fluick from Tasmania. He's got a system where they make a Linux distro and put it on a USB pen drive. And so the student boots their laptop off this USB pen drive. It boots into a Linux environment that's completely secure. They've actually taken out all the network drivers, so you cannot open an internet connection at all. The exam paper and so on is like a OpenOffice document on the desktop. They open that, they type their answers in, they save it back onto the pen drive, and they hand the pen drive in at the end. We thought about that. We thought 92,000 pen drives. Someone's going to have to duplicate those. We're going to have to not lose them. We're going to have to get the data off them. It's clearly a valid approach, but we didn't think it would suit our particular needs, but it's worth knowing about. The question asked earlier, who provides the laptop? If you can use the university's own computers, you have much more control over them, and that's much easier. And a lot of universities they have computer rooms already. They're taking that approach. It makes a lot of sense. Again, the 92,000 number and the fact we have to hire exam halls all around the country, we've gone down the route of saying, at least for now, that the students have to provide their own laptop. There are other interesting possibilities you could look at. I mean, because of course you don't need 92,000 at once. I don't know what's the most number of students to take an exam on a single day or a single morning or a single afternoon. It's probably in the thousands. You could wonder, how much does 1,000 Chromebooks cost? Is that prohibitive as an investment over a few years? So we could go back to considering providing the computers if students providing their own computers really doesn't work. So that's out there, and it's clearly a simpler option if you can adopt it. But actually, there's another interesting experience from Edinburgh. At the Edinburgh Moodle Moot, all the presentations had to be done on the laptops provided by the conference. And it was a real pain. You're standing up, you're a bit stressed because you're presenting, and you've got this funny laptop with some strange trackpad. It hasn't got a proper mouse. Some of the keyboard, some of the keys you use for keyboard shortcuts are in the wrong place. Using an unfamiliar computer can be a pain, and in an exam which is already stressful, do you really want that? Whereas if it's the computer you're used to, that's a bit nicer. There is this question, the question was asked, do students still have to go to an exam hall? And at least for now, the answer is yes, because of the security thing. There are companies out there who will offer to invigilate an exam over the internet. Like now there's a webcam on me. We talked to at least one of those companies, and they offered us a free trial, and so 20 OU staff booked a slot to do an online exam being invigilated, proctored over a webcam. And we were, of course, encouraged to try and cheat and break the system. Now, I'm pretty unimaginative. I couldn't think of any good ways to try and cheat, so I played it straight. I just went in, tried to do the exam and see how it worked. But the first thing that happens is this stranger you've never met at the other end of the internet wants to make a remote desktop connection to your personal laptop and start changing system configuration settings and so on. And that didn't make me very happy, because the Open University has a contract with this company to provide a service. They have no contract with me. If they do something that breaks my computer, what sort of comeback do I have? So that was a concern. And then during the exam, they're looking at you through the webcam, but first of all, they want you to sort of wave the webcam around the room to make sure you're alone and you don't have your iPhone sitting on the desk, ready to do a Google search and so on. Now, I've got a MacBook Pro here, so the webcam is built in, so I was kind of picking up my laptop and trying to angle it around, and, it was not easy, and a couple of times during the exam, they thought my eyes were straying to the side, so they wanted me to move the webcam again to prove I still wasn't cheating, and that was, a bit disruptive. And again, you're in a stressful situation. So there's a kind of false positive thing there, that even if you're not cheating, the kind of remote webcam proctoring gets in the way. At the other end, actually the most creative cheating was the OU's head of exams. So this is a senior manager, and clearly he's a smart guy. What he did, he got his computer and plugged in a second monitor and a second keyboard at the end of a long set of cables. He sat there in front of the webcam pretending to type, and in the other room, his wife was actually typing the answers with, whatever dictionary she wanted access to. So that's our head of exams and assessment. He's a smart guy, and that was the best cheat. A couple of other people, someone else, they had both their iPad and their iPhone to hand, and the people at the other end spotted the iPad and got them to take it away, but this person still managed to, during the exam, without being detected, use the iPhone to do a Google search to look up one of the answers. So, there are at least two people who managed to defeat the system when they were trying. Having said that, it's not really secure enough. We haven't ruled it out completely because actually it's I've been telling all the things about it that are really bad, but there are some situations where it may be the best option of the ones available. I've mentioned this problem of students who are abroad at the moment of the exam, and maybe for those students the least bad option is to use this online proctoring service. We're considering it, but it's not, it's currently not really being proposed. Anyway, that's another interesting choice to be aware of if you're interested in this area. These services exist. Whether you think they're suitable for your scenario is another matter. And it has to be said, an awful lot of people, both colleges, universities, and sort of commercial training organisations use these services. And a point I made at the start, this classic lockdown exam where, very, very 19th century, it's you, a bit of paper, and your brain. Is that really a good modern assessment of the student's abilities? Well, no, it's not. We should be thinking about more open book exams, more kind of 21st century skills. But that's a big, policy question, and it's not the policy question we're considering here. But it's that's kind of a pedagogic question, and I'm a software developer. So, sort of, those are my four kind of dimensions where there's a choice to be made, and we've made the choices on the left at the moment. We'll see how it goes. We'll review it as necessary. And I think that summarizes it all.
Thank you, Tim. On behalf of iMoot, really interesting. It is a very fascinating area of difficulty. I know I've certainly run exams as a teacher before, and certainly created lockdown environments, and it's no easy task to cater everything that may be happening. So thank you very much for your time, and obviously I'll leave to answer any more questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to hang around to answer more questions for a bit. Joshua raises a good point. And of course, it's interesting to ask, with my other hat, with my Moodle quiz developer hat on, how much elementary chemistry could we grade automatically? In the field of maths, we now have Stack, and I have to say the OU maths faculty are looking at Stack and what it can grade automatically, and rubbing their hands in glee at the thought that maybe one day they won't have to mark 1,000 exam papers at the end of the level 1 maths module. We're some way away from that being a reality, but they're thinking about it, and they may be pushing to actually make it happen. Yeah, I mean, exams at the OU, exams come at the end of a module, and students get graded on two things. There's the sort of end of module assessment, which is mostly an exam, but in other scenarios a sort of portfolio or something. But then throughout the module they get various forms of continuous assessment, some of which are like essays or so on, or assignments submitted like as upload a Word document, a human being marks it and they get it back. And the others are, of course, Moodle quizzes for automatically graded things where that's appropriate. So we're already using Moodle quiz a lot for assessed work, but only in the continuous assessment part of the course until now. And even if you don't want to go all the way we have, the secure exam browser and the integration with the Moodle quiz is really quite nice. It does a lot of what you want. So and it's open source as well, so it's worth having a look at. As at the moment, because most students are still answering the exams on paper, then the people who grade the exam responses, they're responsible for typing. We have an exam results database system, so the human markers just type all the grades into there. We have more automated systems for the continuous assessment type of Moodle quizzes. We do there have we have a Moodle, I think it's a local plugin that automates exporting the grades from the gradebook and posting them off to the other system. In fact, that's why in the Moodle gradebook, one of the export options is an XML format that's just very simple. It's like student ID, quiz ID, grade. We made up that format for the OU for shipping grades from Moodle to our other student record system. Thanks, Joshua. Well, if there are no more questions, should we wrap it up now? Thank you all for your attention during this presentation. I hope you found it interesting.